Today is a full review of Centaurus by Creed. My initial first impressions of this one was, wow, this is not a strong release. I wasn't impressed by this one. I was actually quite underwhelmed, and I thought this is probably going to be a flop. This is not a great fragrance, especially considering the pricing. It's £235 sterling for a 50 ml. That's £4.70 per milliliter. It's extremely expensive, and yeah, I just thought this fragrance sucked. So I watched a few videos on YouTube of fellow reviewers to see, I was kind of thinking that they would probably mirror a similar opinion, and I was very wrong. So I guess this will be an unpopular opinion, but we'll get into it with a full review.
So what can you expect from the brand new Centaurus by Creed? This is an incredible fragrance, 10 hours longevity, phenomenal projection for the first hour of application, and this fragrance is going to be one of the darkest fragrances that the brand of Creed has ever manufactured.
But this is a very strong fragrance in terms of the performance. This is a beast mode. It is very complex and very unique. That is just incredible. And when I tell you incredible, I don't say that word easily. This is incredible.
New Creed, baby! Wow, it's actually very nice. There's a little bit of a familiarity with this scent though. Feels hybrid. There's like little essences here of royal oud, and I'm kind of picking up PDM-ish kind of energy here. Carlisle-ish kind of energy to me, sort of. Yeah, it's like a, wait, Bach? Okay, first off, the fragrance is very nice. It's spicy, it's musky, it's tobacco. It's kind of like Mancera Red Tobacco Carlisle meets Royal Oud.
I know that this one is tobacco with some spices and amber too, woody. This definitely has like a very classic masculinity to it. I feel like this one might be a little bit more difficult for women, but beautiful on a man.
So I have been wearing Centaurus by Creed. I wanted to pick this one up, obviously, well, I say not, it's probably not obvious to everyone. It's obvious to me that I picked it up because of the name Centaurus. For anyone that doesn't know, I am a self-taught perfumer that I launched my own brand called Centauri, and Centaurus is a constellation, basically, and yeah, I launched my own brand called Centauri, which is part of the same thing. And I launched one called Centauri Proxima, Proxima Centauri being the nearest star. And so, yeah, I was fascinated what Creed might do with basically the same theme as my own brand. And yeah, I was just curious. They have a new bottle design. It now comes in a red bottle, this particular collection, which they call the Amber Universe. But what they mean by that is synthetic ambers. We'll start things off with the official note list. So in the top we've got cardamom, cinnamon and pink pepper, with tobacco, geranium, sandalwood, heliotrope and jasmine, patchouli, benzoin, tolu, balsam, tonka bean, ambroxan and vanilla. So what I get from this when I first apply is immediately you get the smell of heliotrope. For anyone that doesn't know how heliotrope smells, the closest thing I could point you to might be something along the lines of the smell of Play-Doh. It definitely reminds me of Play-Doh. And so you get this kind of, if I don't use the analogy of Play-Doh, I would describe it as sweet and rubbery. But Play-Doh is the closest thing I can think of. But it has an obvious heliotrope note up front and center from the get-go, mixed with a spice, a warm spice, mostly cinnamon. I don't, to be honest, get pink pepper in this. I don't really get cardamom much either. I would say it's more cinnamon. But you get this warm spice mixed with heliotrope. Again, sweet Play-Doh-like, a little bit kind of rubbery in texture. Tobacco is listed as a main note in this fragrance. It's actually marketed as a tobacco fragrance, and to be honest, I just don't get it. It doesn't smell like tobacco to me, but it does have this kind of warmth and sweetness which I think people associate with tobacco fragrances. By itself, I don't think it's a tobacco fragrance. in my personal opinion, if this hadn't been marketed as tobacco and it wasn't in the note list, I would be amazed if any of the other reviewers would say, oh, I smell, you know, tobacco in this. They just wouldn't. It's because it's marketed as tobacco. They just say tobacco because it's in there, so to speak. But by itself, I don't think it smells like tobacco. You're going to get heliotrope, sweet Play-Doh, you're going to get warm spice, cinnamon, and you're going to get an amber kind of accord, which is a mix. You're going to get an obvious synthetic ambroxan, which is very, very noticeable in the dry down. It's basically the only thing you smell in the far end of the dry down. It is mixed with some natural resins like benzoin, tolu balsam. That does add a little bit of extra richness and more natural kind of sweetness to the amber, rather than just solely ambroxan. Ambroxan is definitely a key component to this whole fragrance. It's an obvious smell in this. Patchouli is listed. On my skin chemistry personally, it's not a massive note. I think you do get a hint of a kind of a slightly more dirty earthiness at certain points in the midsection of the fragrance. But on my skin chemistry personally, that isn't a huge thing. I'm not a huge fan of patchouli, and this didn't put me off, but I have heard from other people that the patchouli was quite strong on their skin. Again, I think this maybe is a little bit different on different people's skin chemistry as to kind of what notes come out a little bit stronger on you. Patchouli wasn't a massive factor on my skin. It was more, like I say, heliotrope and going into ambroxan and the sweet notes. So yeah, that was more of a nuanced note, at least in my experience. And from that point, there's not a whole lot of change. There is a sandalwood kind of accord note in there that is just light and smooth, mixing in with that kind of ambery kind of accord. It's warm, it's inviting, it's cozy, it's comforting, it's pleasant. It definitely doesn't smell bad, but I just was not impressed. I just thought this was like kind of mediocre. It smells more like a designer kind of release, or maybe not like totally high street designer level, maybe a little bit above that, but it's not niche perfumery. It's just, to be honest, my first impressions of this was that it kind of sucks quality wise. It's just not a good quality smelling perfume. Some people might not agree, but it's just not. It's mostly synthetic, and when it's relying on things like ambroxan to carry the weight of it in the base, how can you argue with that? I mean, it's just not a great quality perfume. I'm slightly offended by it because of the pricing. I think it's a little bit egregious to charge in excess of £200 a bottle for this kind of formula. It's not niche perfumery to me. It's a bit pathetic. Again, the smell by itself is fine. It smells nice enough. I mean, it's pleasant. It's not a bad smelling fragrance. It's just not a £200 smelling fragrance. That's my grievance with it. If it was priced accordingly, I'd give it a fairer review based on the fact that it's, you know, priced appropriately. Because it's priced the way it is, I have a problem with it. There's not much to say apart from, as it dries down, what I'm left with around the 4 to 5 hour mark is mostly a combination of the sweet notes with ambroxan, vanilla tonka ambroxan together, and really that's kind of your base accord going forward from the 6 hour mark on. And the next day I can still smell it on my hand faintly as just the leftover of ambroxan. We'll move on to performance for this. In my personal experience, I didn't find it beast mode. It actually sat fairly close to my skin. I had to be kind of in this range to kind of pick it up within an hour of applying it. It wasn't huge on my skin. That seems to be different from other people, so I think skin chemistry is important there. But it wasn't amazing on my skin. I would say the longevity was 6 to 7 hours before you might want to reapply, but you can smell a skin scent for 10, 11, 12 hours, which is just ambroxan. I mean, it literally is an ambroxan dry down. It's nothing to rave about, so to speak, in terms of longevity, because what you're left with is just a cheap synthetic that you can get from designer fragrances. To sum this up, I would say it's generally mass appealing because it uses modern ambers that most of the population think smells pleasant and nice. It uses a warm, soft, masculine spice, which is sweet, which again, mass appealing, most of the population will think is nice. If you're a perfume niche collector, I honestly, my first reaction was that this is just not gonna do well in that circle, but from apparently watching other videos, I guess I'm wrong. I'm a bit surprised, but apparently people really like this one. I really don't get why, but there you go. It's just my honest opinion. I don't rate this fragrance. I think it's one of the poorer ones from Creed. I think the pricing is outrageous, to be honest. You're paying for kind of the brand name, just the name, the bottle, the image of owning a Creed, rather than the actual quality of the juice inside, because that is not a 200 and whatever pounds worth of perfume in there. It's just not. And I don't think you're getting your money's value in this product, to be perfectly blunt. Obviously you can spend your money how you like, but I would not recommend paying full retail for this fragrance. I would say it's an autumn winter casual fragrance, better suited to the evening. It's not something you would want to wear to work. That's kind of the ballpark I would put it in. And yeah, that's my best take. Expect heliotrope, kind of sweet Play-Doh, rubbery kind of vibe with a warm spice going into a slightly woody, ambery, slightly sweet midsection, going into basically a vanillic ambroxan dry down with, you know, ambroxan on the next day as a skin scent. Something I wish other reviewers would talk about more, which they don't seem to do, is taking into consideration the price of the things that they're talking about. No one seems to talk about, is this good value for money? Am I getting a good deal? Like, is this overpriced for what I'm getting quality-wise in the perfume? Apparently no one cares. Am I the only one that thinks about that? Like, when I smell something, I guess this is because I'm a brand owner and a perfumer, and I sell my own work, and so I know how much things cost. I know how much my own fragrance cost and the quality of the materials I'm using, like real oud, real ambergris, real orris butter, you know, very expensive naturals, and I can make them cheaper than what this is that's just using ambroxan. And so, like, I understand pricing, I guess, better than the average reviewer, but I do wish people would think about it a little bit more, because they're advertising it to an audience, to you guys, and saying, yeah, this smells great, but does it smell like 200 pounds excess of greatness? No, it absolutely does not smell like a 200 plus pound fragrance. It just doesn't. I don't care if you don't agree, you are wrong, basically. Personally, I think this is quite disappointing, but people like it, so there you go. Hope you find that useful, and I will see you again in the next video. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Old man Harlem gives me Sunday headache, but that old man Harlem keeps me rolling on.